It is early winter 552, and throughout Italy there is a growing sense of relief and thanks for deliverance. The army of Narses, court eunuch to the Roman Emperor Justinian, has now delivered no fewer than 2 great victories in open battle with the Goths, first destroying the main army of Totila at Tagine, and then obliterating the remnants under Teius in the shadow of Vesuvius. A few of the small remaining Gothic garrisons dotted around the country hunker down and pray for a miracle, while thousands of others who have made their life in Italy over the preceding 60 years stream north. But just as the clouds of war appear to be finally blowing off and leaving nothing but clear skies, a new storm appears on the horizon. Theodebald of the Franks, barely 20 years old and known to be sickly, has thus far stood aloof from taking a side in the war between the Romans and the Goths. The Franks control the north of Italy, and there has been little need to waste good men in the interminable 16-year Gothic War. Now, the moment has come to strike. 2 leaders of ancient Alemanni peoples, Lutherus and Bucellin, step forward and seek permission to lead a force south. The Alemanni are ostensibly subject to the Franks since the victories of Clovis decades earlier, but Theodebald puts no restriction on his vassals recruiting Frankish warriors for what is to be an invasion of the still rich Italian peninsula. Thus, with Narses negotiating at the walls of Cumae in the spring following the bitter battle with Teius at Mons Lactarius, 75,000 barbarians flood across the border and make straight for the shell-shocked cities of Italy. Things are about to get messy. But what's also messy is how scammers get your phone number and why your inbox is flooded with spam. My inbox often looks like medieval carnage. This happens because companies called data brokers sell your data without your consent, and they make billions selling it to marketers, scammers, and even stalkers. And though they're required to remove your info if you ask, they purposefully make the process more confusing than the War of the Roses. Sadly, a swing of my dull medieval sword replica won't solve this problem, despite my masterful skills. But what will rid you of these rascals is my sponsor, Aura. They take care of the hard part, automatically removing your info from these sites and keeping it off. So spread the word to your family and friends that Aura is all-in-one digital security. Not having Aura is like not having a castle garrison when bandits come to plunder the village. With Aura, you get alerts if your personal info is found on the dark web. You get real-time fraud alerts for credit and banking. 24/7 monitoring keeps your identity secure. They have a secure VPN, antivirus, password manager, and more, as well as US-based support that's available around the clock. Moreover, Aura includes $5 million in identity theft insurance protection. One app, every layer of protection. Simple, like a mace to the noggin. Try Aura free for 14 days at aura.com/historymarsh. In those 2 weeks, you'll discover where your data is being exposed and sold. And because Aura knows my viewers are battle nerds, they are giving all of you 60-day money-back guarantee because they don't want to risk you going medieval on them. Narses acts decisively in the face of the invasion, leaving a holding force at Cumae and then moving into the central terrain of the peninsula. Centumcelle, Florence, Volaterrae, Pisa, and Luna all come over to the imperial side in short order, but there remains a defiant Gothic garrison at Lucca, and they have heard that the Franks are sending an army to fight the Romans. They will not surrender. The mixed Alemanni and Frank army is by now approaching Parma, and Narses sends another mixed host and the greater part of his front-line fighters north under John and Valerian to take up position on the Po and block any advance. Nevertheless, the Alemanni take Parma. A force of Eroli attempt to retake the town without awaiting Narses' orders or possible reinforcement, and they are badly defeated. John and Valerian retreat to Faventia, while the Alemanni and Franks put the north of Italy to fire and sword. Narses, meanwhile, has finally compelled the Lucans to surrender, and better news is to come when he moves on to Ravenna to arrange his strategy for the coming cold months. There, Aligen, the Gothic commander of Cumae, arrives and formally cedes control of the city to the Empire. With the situation in central and southern Italy stabilized, Tarentum having been won back at the same time as the campaign against Teius by the Roman commander of Hedrentum, Pacorius, Narses travels from Ravenna to Rome and governs there during the cold months. The crisis in the north will have to wait until spring. When the thaw does come, Narses surprises many by bringing the army that he had left in the environs of Ravenna south to Rome and draws his forces together there. It appears that sparing the mother of cities from another sacking is his main priority. Still, apart from the heavily walled town and fortresses, all of Etruria and the Adriatic regions are now fair game for the spoliating Alemanni and Franks. The pleasant weather brings with it the bouquet of death and holocaust, as the bands of Bucellan and Lutherus blaze ever mercilessly south. They demur at the prospect of laying siege to Rome, splitting into two separate bands under their respective leaders in Samnium, and lighting trails of fire down the land. Berry tells us that Bucellan strikes with the greater number into Campania, Lucania, and Bruti to the Straits of Messina. Lutherus helps himself to Apulia and Calabria as far as Hydruntum. This pillage pleases the Alemannic leader, and satisfied with his haul, he begins the march north once more. Bucellan, on the other hand, has been swayed not only by the numbers of Gothic remnants who have flocked to his standard and merrily joined his rampage, but also their and his own subordinates' encouragement to face Narses in battle and take the crown of Italy for himself. Seeing the passivity of the Roman commander during his march south, Bucellan decides that his time has indeed come, and he will offer battle to the elderly courtier. Sending word to Lutherus for reinforcement, he begins to march toward Capua. Lutherus is still marching north, but he promises to send the requested units once he is safely out of Italy. Raiding and the gigantic bounty of treasure and captives are enough for him. Lutherus's plans are dealt a blow, however, when his column is ambushed at Fanum by a force of Romans who have moved from their station at Pisaurum. The Alemanni and Franks are like a slow-moving turtle, so laid down are they with loot, and the Romans chase them off with glee and retake possession of the goods. Lutherus manages to clear the ambush with the better part of his force intact, which is a deliverance from what is a near-fatal brush with Narses' forces, but it remains a galling loss of the rosy future he had imagined for himself. He makes for the settlement of Ceneta to regroup and take stock of his position. Meanwhile, Narses has heard of Bucellan's move toward Capua and how he has established his position on the Volturnus river. Seeing this as the opportunity for which he had been waiting, Narses deploys his entire field force, 18,000 men, and marches to confront the Alaman and his horde. Any hope that Bucellan has of receiving extra companies from Lutherus evaporate when messengers arrive with news that disease has broken out at Ceneta, and the Alemannic force, as well as their Frankish and Goth allies, have died along with their commander. Bucellan will fight Narses alone. When Narses reaches Bucellan's position, he finds that the Alemannic's leader has built his camp so that the Volturnus acts as a bulwark on one side, and the remaining three are also well secured with defensive works, mostly the repurposed components of supply wagons and any other heavy objects to hand. Narses observes that Bucellan has fortified the nearest bridge with nothing less than a watchtower, thus not only giving cover against an attack on the camp's entrance, but providing a route of escape should the Romans successfully best the enemy in the field. Narses disdains to embark on a full-scale attack, which would likely be successful but undoubtedly costly in lives, so he proposes to offer open battle in the field. First, however, he must eliminate the tactical advantages of Bucellan's preparations. The Armenian cavalry officer Chanaranges is directed to lead what amounts to a commando mission. Capturing a number of Alemanni supply wagons, Chanaranges storms the bridge, taking the defenders by surprise, and then wheeling the wagon up to the tower with its contents set on fire. Choosing to vacate their wooden tower rather than burn to death, the defenders flee, and the first tactical win is to the Romans. Narses begins preparations for a decisive encounter, but he is interrupted when a disruption and altercation takes place in his camp. A member of the heralds, the foederati whose exemplary quality of infantry has assisted in the victories at Tagini and Mons Lactarius, puts a servant to death for an undisclosed infraction, and Narses calls the man up for punishment. The Herulian leadership protest, stating that they are free to follow their own traditions outside of Narses' Christian structures, but the Roman commander is adamant in reserving the right to give or take life within his own army. It is a strong test of Narses' leadership, and he cannot allow the Herulians to overrule him, or else he will lose control of his highly diverse force. In the end, outright violence among the Roman Confederation is avoided, but the heralds announce that they will withdraw from the fighting. Narses respects their decision and makes it clear that he will keep the Herulian place in the line open should they have second thoughts and wish to partake in the coming battle. Seemingly unbeknownst to Narses, two disgruntled Herulians make their way into the Alemannic camp, and there they pass on word of events to Bucellan. They tell him in no uncertain terms that the Herulian section of the Roman line will be empty, and all he needs to do is direct his attack toward that, and the Roman line will implode like an inflated bladder. Bucellan is overjoyed at the intelligence, and the next morning when Narses draws up his formations to offer battle, he has his own companies brought forth from their fortifications, and they take their place on the field. The Romans take up a similar line to that they had formed at Tagini, an infantry centre with cavalry on the wings. While Narses had the majority of these horse archers on foot at the earlier battle, now he appears to order them to stay on their mounts. The missing Herulian position is glaring, but Narses has some troops kept in the rear in reserve in front of the Roman camp for any necessary developments. Bucellan has been told that Narses' numbers are greatly reduced from their high point in the campaign against Totila, and it appears to the Alemannic leader that the Roman host is barely half that of his own 20,000-strong force, neatly fitting to the wooded areas on the left side of the Roman line. As at Tagini, Narses, in spite of his advanced years, has positioned himself on the right wing. The Alamans and their Frankish allies form into two distinct columns that converge into a strong single point at their head, the cuneus wedge or boar's head, so designed that the men at the front line can batter their way through the enemy using their tight shield wall. Though the Alamans and Franks are considered barbarians, their peoples have been in contact with the Romans for centuries, and they have a knowledge of military strategy and tactics, if not the discipline, supply, and training of the ancient legions. Narses' Roman army itself is also a degenerated entity from those centuries of greatness, and Bucellan is of the opinion that this day will bring him glory and renown beyond imagination. The Herulian deserters have told him that not only is Narses missing their vital contingent, but the whole Roman army is despondent as a result of their withdrawal. Bucellan need only smash his axe through their flimsy door, and the whole house will be his for the taking. At the trumpet's call, the Franks and Alamans storm forward toward the Roman position. Their spirits are high, their limbs strong. The lances and blades they carry are perfectly weighted and sharp. Even the hail of arrows from the archers lining the Roman center and the flanks fails to dampen their ardor. On they go, Bucellan screaming out holy terror in their midst, urging them forward and feeling their strength grow with every step. By comparison, the Romans are silent, mooted as they loose their bows and then throw their lances when the enemy is close and sprinting toward their redoubt. Bucellan's men reach the Romans' palisade, axes chopping at the barricades, spears thrusting over at the faces of the defenders. They make straight for the gap where the Herulians should be making their stand, and they flood through the attempts to hold them back with dismissive ease. The boar's head has rammed its way to success, thousands of troops still behind in the two columns and making their way forward. The wider flanks and even units of the Roman center seemingly unable to get to grips with them. The same is true for the Roman reserve, which is engaged by some units of the advance guard, but others are able to bypass it entirely. The farthest units of Bucellan's vanguard reach the outskirts of the Roman camp, and fighting erupts there with the sentries. The Germanic fury is incessant, inexhaustible. Spears stab at the defenders, and swords flash in arcs to bring down those who are distracted with defending themselves. Bucellan can feel it. He has done what the great Tortilla failed to do and defeated the Roman eunuch. He can taste the ambrosia of victory on his tongue. His men are singing as they slaughter. Then, there is a change in the air. It seems as though the gods have flicked their fingers, and suddenly all is different in some indescribable manner. Bucellan cannot see the units around the camp and fighting the Roman reserve, but it is clear that the forward movement has come to an abrupt cessation. The columns are not advancing any longer through the Roman line. Though it is past the line of visibility to the majority of Franks and Alamans in the midst of the battle, the Herulian infantry has emerged and formed a solid row of steel before Bucellan's vanguard. With a cold fury every bit as effective as the enemy, they begin to push back the Franks. Bucellan has time to finally register this, but there is nothing he can do. For at that same moment, Narses gives a signal from his position on the wing, and the Roman flanks begin to move outward. The wings are filled with horse archers, and these rain arrows down on the backs of the Franks and Alaman advanced front lines. The unfortunate vanguard is now being attacked on 3 sides at once, and its men quickly fall into despair when they cannot see the source of the arrows that are felling their comrades by the hundred. It is at this point that Narses gives another signal, and on the Roman left wing, additional cavalry units emerge from the woods. This has the effect of unleashing latent panic in Bucellen's columns, and they rapidly lose all semblance of cohesion and begin to flee. In their alarm at the horse archers charging their rear, the Franks and Alamans rush forward through the gaps in the Roman line and upset their vanguard there. Thus, the entire Frank and Alaman army is now behind the original Roman positions, and the Herulians neatly march forward and take their place amidst the formation. The Romans, in their regular and practiced division, then advance in a line on the hysterical enemy, who is left with 2 choices: annihilation at the hands of the resurgent and merciless advance, or else to throw themselves into the river. To make matters worse, the Roman horse archers have retaken their places on the wings, and with the support of the ferocious infantry, they spray deadly hails of arrows down at the stranded units on the banks. The carnage is like nothing else. A few make it across the river, but the majority drown in the effort. Those that choose to offer resistance die where they make their stand. The chronicler Agatius records that fewer than 10 men survive from Bucellen's force of 20,000, while the Roman deaths are significantly lower than 100 in total. It is a superlative and glorious victory for the empire. Though there is no way for him to be sure at the time, Narses has finally secured Italy for the empire, and in honor of his service, Emperor Justinian makes him exarch, or governor of the entire peninsula. A new dawn has risen for the Romans, and what was lost has now been refound. Narses embarks on a years-long project of rebuilding, reorganizing and replenishing, and for the first time in 100 years, those who believe in the divine destiny of the universal empire and faith can console themselves that all is as it should be. If you like what you see, consider supporting my work on Patreon, and you get ad-free early access to my videos for as little as $1. You can also show your support by liking the video, commenting, and subscribing to my channel as a sacrifice to the algorithm. As always, I'll see you in the next one.